Today's episode is a pretty massive one here in this franchise, as we've got the second lottery of this series, and after a season in which we broke the NBA record for most losses in a season, I would say this lottery has a pretty massive impact as to how the future of this team will look. Hopefully we can get some lottery luck, but after winning the number 1 overall pick last year, it just seems like our odds haven't technically changed, but we're really gonna win number 1 2 years in a row. Time will tell, but before we get to that lottery, and of course our final big draft preview after it, we've got a season's worth of playoffs to get through here. The 4 play-in teams involved are the Utah Jazz against the Houston Rockets and the San Antonio Spurs against the Timberwolves in the West. And in the East, the 76ers face off Toronto and the Pacers have Charlotte. So let's see how this play-in goes. Utah and San Antonio make it in the West, while Philadelphia and Indiana make it in the East. And of course, as we do every year, if we get to a Game 7, we'll simcast it. But other than that, we will start to get this Year 2 playoff run underway. So far, looking like there's no 2-2s. So maybe not the most. No game went past 5 in the entire round. Every single. This is kind of like what you see in real life. The first round is kind of just for show. Sometimes you'll get like a good 4 or 5 series, or maybe even 3-6. But of course, you'll get good series on all the seeds occasionally. But for the most part, the first round doesn't have a lot of competitive basketball. Last year in this game, it was much more competitive than what we saw. But it looks like both the 3-seed Magic and the 2-seeded Boston Celtics are down in just 5. And then we've got Cleveland, Detroit, which this is the matchup that I really wanted to see. I think these are the 2 best teams in the league. Whereas we saw the 4-seeded Dallas favorite go home, as well as 2-seeded Denver taken out in 5 by the Utah Jazz. So let's simulate now round 2. Hopefully we can get some more competitive basketball in this round. So far, that upper right 2-1 lead for Cleveland. We got a 2-2 series here with Memphis and Utah. Make that now 3-2. Man, this Detroit and Cleveland series is looking mighty fancy, but we've got Memphis and Utah in a Game 7, and we'll see if either of these series last to 7 as well. Doesn't look like either of them did. So Detroit takes down the 1-seed Cleveland Cavaliers in 6 games. Both 1 seeds fall in the second round. And then the 7-seed Sixers are in the Eastern Conference Finals. So unless Memphis wins here, the highest seed going to the conference finals will be a 4-seed, and that's the Pistons. And I could have told you that the Pistons are going to make it. They're a really good basketball team. So let's go ahead and get this Game 7 Utah and Memphis underway. And Memphis has really jumped out to a pretty big lead here, and they'll take it by 25. So we got our 1 Game 7, but it was not a competitive one by any means. Memphis, OKC in the West, Detroit, Philadelphia in the East. Didn't mean to actually simcast that game. Let's get through these conference finals. Wow, Philadelphia runs through and sweeps the Pistons. The 7-seeded Sixers are in the NBA Finals. They swept the best team in the league. Cade, Kawhi, Giannis, and Jaden Ivey. But they had nobody to guard Joel Embiid. Detroit's one really big weakness was their center. And now they've got some expiring contracts. It'll be interesting to see if they can keep that team together. It might be a little bit too OP. They went all in for this year. and it ends up only lasting until the conference finals. We've got a game 6 here, and so neither conference finals gets to a game 7. Joel Embiid wins Eastern Conference Finals MVP, while SGA wins it in the West. Now, will we get a game 7 in the NBA Finals? Philadelphia almost sweeps the Thunder, but the Thunder are clawing back, and they make it from 0-3. We have got a game 7. What will go down here looks like a pretty even game here, but Philly coming off to a big lead in the second, and it is close here in the fourth. We've got a single-digit ball game, but Philly starting to get a little bit of a lead here, and they do ultimately pull away and an 11-point win. Game 7 of the NBA Finals. Embiid with 35, 14, and 5. Maxey with 24, 1, and 2 in the close win. And then SGA with 25, 4, 11, and 5. Did everything he could. Chet, really good game as well. Maybe just a year too early for the Thunder, and Philadelphia up on top of the league. They won year 1 too, didn't they? I'm not crazy. I think we have a 2-time champion back-to-back. Philadelphia 76ers on top of the NBA world. Now, getting through everything up until the draft lottery here, we got retirements, and I cannot override LeBron. I think he shouldn't retire here, but I'm fine with him doing it, I guess. Other big names, Gordon Hayward had some good years. Of course, Kevin Love and Kyle Lowry, big names as well. Serge Ibaka, John Wall. Injuries cut short what was a promising start to his career. In terms of staff retirements, we got Greg Popovich, Pablo Prigioni, Fleming, Igor Kokoskov, and that guy. And then LeBron, of course, going into the Hall of Fame. 1,580 games played, averaged 27, 7, 7, a steal and a half, 0.8 blocks, 4 MVPs, 21 All-Stars, 4 championships, and won the Finals MVP. All NBA first team 13 times, second team 5 times, and third team 3 times. All defensive team 5 times, all defensive second team once. Won Rookie of the Year. Of course, made the first team in that year as well. Jersey retirements. LeBron will get all 3 of his retired. Blake Griffin will be retired by the Clippers, and Kyle Lowry by the Raptors. Last thing we'll be doing here before we get to the lottery is the league meetings. I'm just trying. Violations in the key one instated will be called after 5 seconds. What's the? It's 3 in the key, and this will change it to 5. I'll just say no to that. I like not camping out in the key. So we'll probably start maybe making some changes next year. I like to give it a couple of years before we kind of make the league a little bit more of our own. And now, for what everybody's waiting for in this episode, the NBA draft portion, starting with the lottery and ending with our draft preview. And now it is time to hop into the lottery. Of course, we have the number 1 overall pick, and that's obviously no surprise, as it was well documented that we were the worst team in NBA history. And with that comes the number 1 overall odds. You see our former expansion team Sonics down there at 5, but we have a 3-way tie for the best odds at number 1. And I honestly feel like with a team that is the worst in NBA history, they should just be given the first overall pick. That would probably invoke some extreme tanking, but like there's tanking, and then there's what this team pulled off last year, which is far more impressive than tanking. And I didn't even try to lose and we just went 8-74. I even, like halfway through the year, lowered the simulator difficulty a little bit, and still we lost the most games in NBA history. That should just be rewarded with something, right? Just kidding. If that was the case, I think teams would actually go, like in this past Wembanyama draft, yes, somebody definitely would have broken the loss record to acquire Victor Wembanyama. So we shouldn't be given number 1 pick, but I wish we were, because I do feel like the top guy in this class is, the best guy by a decent bit. But here we're getting to the top half of the lottery now. Rockets keep their pick at 7. I think the lowest pick we could possibly have is 5. There's been one team that's jumped, I believe. Right? Can't remember who it was, though. Maybe nobody jumped? The Bulls here are inside the top 4, and the Thunder via the Clippers. So we have the Clippers pick next year. That pick just turned into the 5th pick this year. So we have a potentially really awesome pick next year. Pelicans obviously had Milwaukee's pick. That's why they wanted more of a prospect-based return for Giannis. We have a top 2 pick. Are we going to win the lottery 2 years in a row? Come on, baby. We've got the best chance at it. And we end up with number 2. Oh, I thought we were going to win the lottery 2 years in a row. That would have been sick. Instead, it's the Chicago Bulls who win the J.R. Holloway draft. Now, we've seen consensus guys, number 1 guys, not go at number 1 overall. See Jackson Baldwin from 2K23. But I do think J.R. Holloway is going to go number 1. So now that we have secured the number 2 pick, let's talk about some of the prospects that will be available with that pick. And now that we know just where we are picking in the draft, it is time to do our final big draft preview. And for this one, I've got about a dozen players or so that I have clips on. Probably talk a little bit more about a few others that I haven't gotten clips on in this preview. So let's get through it. We're going to go position by position and just kind of talk about the guys that I like. Maybe not necessarily in order, but all the guys that I have my eye on. We're going to start here with point guard A.J. Kennedy, who played for the Kentucky Wildcats last year. He's a guy who kind of a jack of all trades kind of player, and doesn't excel in any one area, but point guard's a position that we really need, and he's a pretty good athlete. He has some upside to him despite being an older prospect at 22 years old. I think he projects to be just a pretty solid kind of player, not somebody that you're going to take and be like, oh, this is somebody that we build around, but I think he could be a good complementary talent in the league, and that is exactly what we project him to be should we draft him, kind of somebody that can come in and provide some stability at a position that we haven't had much stability at all, really, in the first couple seasons of this franchise. And so pretty good IQ, pretty good passer, decent shooter as well. That's kind of what you get with AJ Kennedy. Moving on to a different kind of player for sure is Craig Pearson out of Kansas. This is a very good defensive player, and that is the name of his game. He's the guy that is going to be known in the league as somebody who just makes night for his opposition just a living hell. He loves to pick the ball from the ball handler, get his hands in passing lanes, just really make everything on the offensive side difficult for his opponent. Offensively, there's not really much to say about Pearson that you like. He's not going to be a guy who's going to take a lot of shots. His points per game at Kansas were not good this year, and they're not projected to be very good at the NBA level either. But he's not gonna, be somebody that takes too many shots either. He's not scoring a lot because he's really just not taking too many shots. And so this is a good kind of point guard to play next to stars and just kind of let them do their thing and then do all the dirty work, which is definitely a player that you like to have on good teams. I feel like a lot of the good teams in the NBA have that kind of dirty work player. That is exactly what Craig Pearson is. One of the best athletes in this entire draft, and it really helps him on the defensive end, despite being slightly undersized. There's a question as to what his upside truly is. I don't think it's going to be anything very special. He has 6 badges, though. 1 shooting, which is surprising, and then 5 defensive badges. Actually, 1 playmaking as well. So 4 defensive badges, 1 shooting, 1 playmaking in his arsenal. All NBA upside, although I think like every player has 3 potentials, right? I think his normal potential is pretty low, and so if you want him to get to that, you're gonna have to hit his boom ceiling, which would certainly be possible with this team, I think, just because he'd be getting a lot of playing time should we draft him. But he's definitely not somebody that is gonna get his boom upside probably in terms of stats, just because I want to take a look here at his tendencies. Like shot tendency 39 is really, really low, and so he's not going to take that many shots. I want to take a look at this screen for every player, so I'll go back and look at AJ Kennedy while I have it in my mind. His ceiling is only starter, so he doesn't have a ton of upside on him. Like I said, just going to be a very solid player. And kind of with our second pick, all these point guards that we're looking at, there's nobody going to be worth our first pick. It's all going to be kind of second pick, maybe trade up into the late teens, early 20s if we can in this draft to select a point guard. And that's kind of what we're looking at with this class. The third guy I want to preview at the point guard position that I like is Sam Hudson. Sam Hudson is very much so a score first kind of guard. He excels off ball really, and shooting off the catch and attacking closeouts that are bad. He doesn't make any kind of wow plays passing, but he is definitely willing to hit the open man when he sees him for sure. He's just not somebody that you really want to run your offense through like you typically might do with point guards, as he is more of an off-ball kind of guy. And man, I swear, I did a terrible job editing these players. All these clips have like one clip of somebody else that mixed in between them, so I apologize for that. But Hudson, he pretty good athlete. He has some upside to him. Now his starting point's not great, only 71 overall, and his skill set is really his shooting, and has 4 badges. All of them are shooting, so gonna be more of a score first kind of guard, and he has that all NBA Tim Hardaway upside, and so I think he'd be a very intriguing pick if we could trade up, into the very back of the first round and take this guy to enter that point guard rotation. I'd be all for it. That's kind of it for the point guards. Moving along to the shooting guards in this class, let's go ahead and talk about, the guys at the top of this class, Jerry Childress. Now, we've talked about Jerry Childress in our initial, as he's kind of been a top 5 prospect all along in this class, and it's really because he, even more so than the guy we just previewed like Sam Hudson, is an absolute shooter, considered by many to be the best in this entire class. But just because he's more of a shooter doesn't mean he can't score inside. He absolutely can do that. But he's kind of a volume off ball scorer. Does not require, to have the ball in his hands to be a very, very productive player. Can do most of his work off the ball, but when you need him to make the occasional on-ball play, he's certainly capable of that as well. And Childress, I think if we had maybe a little bit less lottery luck, would have been high on my board, because just getting high-end shooters is really important. And luckily, we did get some lottery luck, and we unlikely to take him because of that. But I think he's going to be a really good player for whoever picks him. A+ potential is what our scouts project him to have, which is obviously intriguing at his 74 overall. Consensus more in that A- range, 5 shooting badges to his name, and that all NBA upside. Upsize is not a thing. You know, floor of Kyle Korver, him coming in and being a Kyle Korver kind of player immediately makes a lot of sense to me. Going down the list, we have Christian Davidson, who is the ultimate upside player in this class. As you can see, that Hall of Fame ceiling. This is really kind of a ball of clay kind of player. You don't really know yet what you're going to get from him. He can turn into a great many things. He just really lacked the consistency in his lone year at Gonzaga to be somebody that you can project to have a role in the class. Now, he was originally projected to be the number 2 player selected when this class first came out, and he's slidden down the board a little bit now, maybe more of a back end of the top 10, just because it's hard to pass on that upside once you get to a certain point in the class. And so I imagine Davidson goes somewhere kind of in that 7 to 11 range, maybe, or I think he'll ultimately fall, but some drafts have him falling much further than that even, and I think that would be a mistake. Even though he's not going to be super ready to contribute right away, I mean, you're talking about somebody who could be the best player in this class, and Davidson, and somebody who's got a really moldable skill set, and so I think Davidson will go decently high in this class. Now, I want to talk about somebody who doesn't really have the upside, but definitely has the ability to come in next season and play an impact, and that is Irvin Edwards out of Indiana. He's a guy who is one of the better two-way players for year one in this class. He can score at all 3 levels very efficiently. He's one of the best efficiency-wise from beyond the arc in all of college basketball of the players that are in this class, and so he put up a ton of production at Indiana. Offense really ran through this player, and then defensively, he can more than hold his own. I think he's not going to be somebody that's going to be known as, one of the better defenders in the league or anything, but he's definitely going to be a positive asset in that area. And so I think if you're looking for somebody who can come in and play next year, Irvin Edwards is one of the better players in this class. Now, where he goes is very much up for debate because it just kind of depends on the team's philosophy. Are they drafting for upside, or are they drafting for somebody that, that they know? I really like Irvin Edwards in this class. If he starts to fall, wouldn't mind trading up for him at all, just because getting, a wing with this two-way impact. He's got really good size at 6'7", 220 pounds. He's a little bit older, and I think that contributes to his not great upside. We're showing here is just C+, but he's awesome athlete, awesome defender, awesome scorer. And at a certain point in this class, if he's fallen past the lottery by much, it's going to be hard for me to pass up. He has 2 badges, ankle braces, and corner specialist. Ceiling is Danny Ainge, and his floor is Danny Ainge, so he might already be capped out. There's definitely a chance for that, which obviously isn't great, but I think he's at a decent spot already. I don't know how much he actually needs to improve to be somebody that can make an impact. Not somebody that you're going to build a team around for sure, and that's why I think he'd have to go maybe late teens, early 20s before I start to consider trading up for him, but he's one of the more ready now players in this entire class. Let's transition now to small forward, where I have a few people I want to talk about, starting with J.R. Holloway. Now, Holloway has been the number 1 projected prospect in this entire draft process. He's never not been the top guy going, so very likely going to be a member of the Chicago Bulls here. And that's because this dude can absolutely score on the outside, on ball, off ball, whatever you need him to do. He's not the most explosive kind of quick athlete, doesn't have really the best kind of handle or anything, but he's a very smooth player, can get to his spots, has deceptive strength, which helps him kind of play some post defense. Now, there was a question kind of throughout this draft process as to where exactly he'll play, whether that's the 3 or the 4. He's kind of a combo forward. I think Chicago will likely keep him at that 3 spot where he played at Texas Tech. They had a bit of a big lineup for him here in his season there. And just because he's not quick does not mean he's not a good athlete. He's a very good athlete. It's just he's kind of the forward version of a guy like Lowry, where Lowry is more of the guard. You expect him to have more handle. Not as nearly as good of a defender as Lowry was, the number 1 prospect in last year's draft. I just think a little bit worse of a prospect in general, but man, this dude is going to shoot. Only has 2 badges and has that all NBA Glenn Rice upside. And I think he's going to be a really good player for the Chicago Bulls, should they select him, which certainly all signs point to them doing that. Gregor Hammond's going to be somebody that gets taken in the top 10 of this class, and I just don't see it. I mean, he was very, very productive at UNLV, but he's coming out in his age 22 season for a reason. I mean, the guy isn't much of an athlete, isn't much of a defender, and I think, you know, that 6th man off the bench bucket getter certainly has a role in the NBA, and he should be taken in this first round easily. I just don't really see it in the top 10 that I think has plenty of guys with upside to take over him. Even the other kind of low upside, ready now prospect that we just previewed in Irvin Edwards, I would prefer him over Hammonds because he plays much better defense. But Hammonds truly is one of the best scorers in this class. And once again, you're going to have to excuse me having the occasional clip of the wrong player. Putting together all these clips was very time consuming. It looks like I got a little bit numb towards the end. Maybe skipped out on a couple along the way, but very good scorer in this class, and just not the athlete or the defender that I think is worth where he's going to ultimately be selected in the class. Somebody that could be available maybe in the second round that I am interested in is Ricky Taylor. He is kind of this jack of all trades, master of none kind of guy who has some upside, not a ton to him, but I think he could turn into something someday. And just getting kind of a wing with really good size. He's very young in this draft as well. One of the few teenagers that is going to be coming into the league. And so at Duke, you know, he was one of the highest high school recruits coming into the season. Didn't quite have the season that I think he was expecting. And thus just isn't going to get drafted quite as highly as maybe many thought he would when he was in high school. And so ultimately, very likely he ends up being a second round pick. And I just think if he's there, I'm interested, just because he has like no significant holes and he's a pretty good athlete and can score a decent bit. B- upside is not great, but like I said, we're talking about probably a guy we could get in the second round, and I think that would be worth it for sure. Moving now to the power forwards and the guys that I like in this class. There's actually only one that I have clips for, and he's my favorite pick to go at number 2 in this class, and that is Andre Stevens out of Virginia. Projected to be an 80 overall player. I mean, this is a team that went 8-74. We need somebody that can come and help immediately. He doesn't have the highest ceiling in this entire draft by any means. He projects to be somebody that can come in and help your team next year, be a starting power forward, which is a position I think we really need. We talked about Jalen Johnson last episode. Now we felt like maybe he wasn't the starting power forward of the future. Stevens can definitely project to be that. Right now, his strength is his inside the arc scoring, but he has shown the ability to stretch it out and hit the 3, sets good screens, plays good defense, and is a really good rebounder. And so he's going to be a really good team player now. He's not going to be a superstar, I don't think. I mean, that's why he doesn't have this great upside, but I think he's going to be a guy that absolutely contributes to winning. Excellent positional size. And when you're starting a rebuild with a guy like Sidney Lowry, you're in a position to get some excellent positional size across the board. 6'11", 254 pounds at power forward with A athleticism. I'm really interested in this guy. And despite the B potential, he does have that all-star upside, so I think he might have a boom potential, maybe a little bit higher. And I think he's gonna have a good chance to hit that because he's gonna get really good minutes in year one. He has 5 badges, and starting out with badges I think is a really important thing for a prospect, and so I really like Stevens. Now if we're talking second round, there's a guy I like in JC Carpenter. Don't have any clips of him here, but I think he's a player worth talking about. Kind of a stretch big. He'd be somebody that I'd maybe take and make him our backup power forward. I don't know if he'd start over a guy like Jalen Johnson, but somebody that can just kind of stretch the floor, play a little bit of interior defense. Not much of an athlete, not much upside. He only has this starter upside. He's another guy to look out for in the second round. Now, centers. There is one player that has fallen in the draft a little bit in terms of rankings, and I just don't know why, and that is Gus Miles, the center out of Iowa. He's a player that I actually really like, and if he falls too much in this class, even though we have AC Stevens, I wouldn't mind trading up for him. AC Stevens got injured like 4 or 5 times in the year. Now, a lot of them he could play through, but I think all of them he could play through, but there's something to be said about getting injured all those times. Maybe Gus Miles could be an upgraded version of him. They have very similar skill sets. I think Gus Miles scores inside a little bit better than Stevens, but Stevens has more of a mid-range upside, but both kind of the more traditional center. Stay inside, play great interior defense, grab boards. That's going to be the name of their game. And I think Gus Miles just has a little bit more upside in that game than AC Stevens has. And hopefully, not as much injury proneness as we saw through one season of AC Stevens' career. He's a little bit older for sure, but he's got great size as well. And I just think he's still projected to go kind of in the top 12. If he lands there, I don't see us trading up. But if he starts to slide a little bit with his 3 badges and his all-star upside, Andre Drummond is OP in 2K. If we can get Andre Drummond outside of the lottery, I'm going to do it, if I'm being straight up honest. A couple of other centers that I think are worth talking about in this class. Don't have clips of them either, but starting with Dean Ellis, doesn't have a ton of upside, but he was the center that played alongside Andre Stevens here at Virginia. Very much so, an interior scorer, shot blocker at 7'2". Would like him to be a better rebounder, which is why I don't think he's very high on my board, especially if he has limited upside to improve that rebounding. But I think he's going to be one of the better shot blockers in the league. A good chance of that. He has the 1 badge that is Rise Up. Also, Shannon Stewart is intriguing as kind of a stretch 5 because, as we've seen throughout the year, our centers will occasionally take threes, and so getting somebody that could actually make them would be cool, especially if we don't have to sacrifice him being a good rebounder. Like, Shannon Stewart's one of the better rebounders in the entire class, but he can also hit threes. Him as one of our second round picks wouldn't be crazy. We have 3 of them. We have the 1st, the 3rd, and the 12th pick in the second round, and so we have the ability to maybe at least get somebody that can challenge Cedric Thorpe. We only have 2 big men on the roster. We need a 3rd. And so we'll likely take one at some point in the second round, and Shannon Stewart could certainly be one of them. And that's kind of it for people that I wanted to preview. I think there's actually a couple others that are kind of more upside long shots that we could talk about. I know somebody else has Hall of Fame upside. I'm trying to find him here in this class. Actually, I'll find him faster if I go here. I do have an official draft board. This isn't final rankings or anything, but I put him on here. Guy Harrison. If we look at Guy Harrison, inside scoring, and that's pretty much it. In athleticism, his base potential is only B-, but if you look here, he has Hall of Fame Scottie Pippen potential. So he's definitely somebody that we'll take a look at after the draft for sure. A couple other guys that we haven't talked about. George Constantine is another guy who projects to be pretty good off the rip. He's going to be a 75 overall. Has all-star potential and 4 badges. He's probably the best player that I didn't get clips on probably in this class, if we're being honest. Good scorer. It's kind of a bucket with some C's everywhere else, which can be developed a bit. And so he kind of just barely missed the cut in terms of getting clips of him. And that's kind of it for the guys that I think are worth actually taking time to preview in this class. This preview portion has already gone long enough. I could talk about guys that are not even on my board. I could probably talk about 30 players in this class, but players that we've previewed today, I think, give you a pretty good chance of the guys that I'm looking at in this class. And I'm very excited for this draft. I think that we have the opportunity to get a lot better here in this class. But that's all I've got for this episode. We'll be having the draft coming out very soon. Who do you think we should take it to? Andre Stevens, or should we go a little bit more upside? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you then.